As the original Transformers toy line progressed through the 1980s, it was always experimenting with new gimmicks and play features in order to stay fresh, which steadily grew to consume the line. In 1990, Hasbro bet everything on the tiny Micromasters and the non-transforming Action Master figures, and when sales didn't meet expectations, this year proved to be the final year of the line in America. But Hasbro's European division wasn't ready to throw in the towel, and chose to continue the series with their own unique range of exclusive toys. These are the basics on the European era of the Generation 1 toy line, also known as Generation 1.5. The Transformers toy line was always handled differently in Europe compared to America. The story behind this could be a video all on its own, but to put it simply, as a result of the toys being licensed by multiple different distributors early on, there were essentially 3 different versions of the line available across Europe during the 80s. One in the British Isles, one sold in mainland Europe, and one specific to Italy. And no one version of the line included every figure available in the United States. However, by 1990, things had become pretty streamlined, with a single, unified toy line containing all the same toys as in the US being shared across all European markets, plus Australia and New Zealand. And it was this year that the line first expanded in its own unique direction. You see, Hasbro Europe's head of marketing, Simon Spalding, lacked confidence in the Micromasters and Action Masters, and had the idea to supplement the 1990 product line with re-releases of older toys from the early years of the series. And so, that year saw Prowl, Jazz, Ironhide, Sunstreaker, Inferno, Wheeljack, the Aerobots, and the Stunticons all returned to European shelves in new golden packaging as the Classics range. These figures were promoted by a run of stories in the British Transformers comic, which actively drew attention to how these bots were from a simpler time, before outlandish gimmicks had taken over the series. Spalding's instincts were right. The Classics did well in Europe, but in America, Micromasters and Action Masters fizzled, leading to Hasbro US deciding to end the series. Spalding was dismayed. He believed that, handled correctly, Transformers had the potential to be an evergreen brand, and he used the success of Classics to convince his boss, Bob Prupis, that it was viable to continue producing new toys for the European and Australasian market, keeping the line alive in the hope that Hasbro US would, as Spalding put it, see the error of their ways. Prupis in turn convinced Hasbro's Japanese partner, Takara, and the two companies set to work devising a European line for 1991. Now, due to the short lead time, most of the 91 line was pre-existing product drawn from other sources. It consisted mostly of more Classics re-releases, adding Throttlebots, Dinobots, Triple Changers, and more. Plus a handful of figures previously available only in Japan. The huge Decepticon Overlord, and the Autobot car team, the Brain Masters, recolored and rebranded for Europe as new characters named the Motorvators. The newest offerings were a range of Action Masters, a mixture of brand new figures, originally designed for the American line if it had continued, and recolors of existing figures, each of which came with a new partner robot or vehicle that converted into armor for the figure to wear. The largest took the form of battery-powered motorized exosuits. There were also the Action Master Elites, figures with push-button gimmicks that, unlike other Action Masters, were able to transform. These figures leaned heavily into an early 90s aesthetic, featuring bright, garish colour schemes that set the tone for the years that followed, and went on to be one of the most recognised aspects of the whole Euro Original era. 1992 was when the European line really came into its own. Staking out its own identity with a new packaging design and logo, this year debuted a range of brand new figures created specifically for the European market by a team of designers that included Hasbro Europe's Andy Cousins and Takara's Takio Ejima. The 92 line took things back to the foundational idea of Autobot cars versus Decepticon jets. On the Autobot side were the Turbo Masters, led by Thunderclash, all featuring turbine engines that doubled as spring-loaded missile launchers. On the Decepticon side were the Predators, led by Skyquake, who had missile launchers of their own, plus the additional gimmick of Super Sight. The larger figures had targeting scopes built into their bodies that displayed images of Autobots in their crosshairs, to which the smaller Predators could attach to unlock new images to view. The two groups were the first Transformers toys to feature light piping, moulding the robots' eyes out of translucent plastic, pink for the Autobots, green for the Decepticons, so that they would glow when held up to a light source. A simple gimmick that's been featured on innumerable toys in the decades since. Now, unfortunately, the British Transformers comic ceased running original stories in 1990, meaning that none of the new European original characters were ever showcased in its pages, though a small comic strip was included in the 1992 pack-in catalogue, showing the Turbo Masters and Predators in action. In addition to Europe and Australasia, Hasbro also sold the toys in Canada, and they were even released by Takara in Japan, where they featured in illustrated stories in the pages of TV Magazine. However, these markets didn't get the last few recycled toys that rounded out the 92 line. The Autobot Rescue Force, a retooled, recolored version of the formerly Japanese exclusive team the Breast Force, and yellow recolors of the Decepticon Constructicons. The strong performance of the 1992 line made Hasbro confident in producing an even larger range for 1993, made up entirely of all new figures. These included the Autobot Accelerator cars and Decepticon Sky Scorcher jets, the Autobot Aquaspeeders and Decepticon Stormtroopers, whose temperature-sensitive plastic changed colour when hit with warm water from their water-squirting weapons, the Autobot Lightformers and Decepticon Tracons, armed with large weapons packs that used light-piped scopes to simulate laser fire, and the faction leaders, the Obliterators, Autobot Pyro and Decepticon Clench, whose trailers converted into missile-firing battle stations. Meanwhile, back in America, Hasbro US had taken notice of the success of the European line. Now convinced of the brand's viability, they relaunched it in the US market at the tail end of 1992 as Transformers Generation 2, a new series made up of its own unique combination of re-released, recolored Generation 1 product. In 1993, simultaneous with their European release, they imported the Accelerator, Sky Scorcher, and Aquaspeeder toys to be part of it, giving several of them new US market original names and colour schemes. Though released at the same time, the 93 European toy line wasn't marketed as Generation 2, but it did use the new G2 Autobot and Decepticon insignia, thus existing sort of halfway between the two lines. Generation 1 toys with Generation 2 symbols, the 93 range wound up being nicknamed Generation 1.5 by fans, and in time, that label was expanded to refer to the whole early 90s Euro original era, for the way it sat in between the American G1 and G2. 1993 marked the end of the European-led era of Transformers, as Hasbro US took back creative control of the brand and then launched the Generation 2 line in the European market in 1994. Though the 93 Euro original figures did continue to be available as part of it, re-released in G2 packaging, and a few of them would even put in appearances in the short-lived British Generation 2 comic. The Euro G2 line would also feature a few exclusives of its own. In 1994, there were recolors of the Generation 1 Firecon and Sparkabot toys, while the year's new versions of Optimus Prime and Megatron were rebranded for Europe as new characters, SureShot and Archforce. Then in 1995 came the Power Masters, Autobots and Decepticons with pullback motors, though these weren't true Euro originals, just toys designed for the US market, whose release there was cancelled when, like the original series before it, Generation 2's sales floundered and it was brought to a premature end. The Euro original years are still probably one of the most obscure corners of Transformers history. Very few of the toys would ever be released in the United States in any form. Other than the few brought over for Generation 2, the only molds made available there were Thunderclash, Skyquake, Turbomaster Helicopter Rotorstorm, and Predator Missile Carrier Stalker, which were sold in both 1997's Machine Wars and 2003's Transformers Universe, recolored and reimagined as different characters. However, many of the Euro original bots would eventually enjoy greater exposure in the media and toy lines of the 21st century. Some standout examples include the Turbomasters starring role in the 2004 Dreamwave Productions comic book The Age of Wrath, Skyquake appearing in Transformers Prime in 2011, and the many stories and exclusive toys produced by Fun Publications for both the official convention, BotCon, and the Transformers Collectors Club. But by far the most impact was had by IDW Publishing's comics, and in particular, writers James Roberts and Nick Roach, fans who grew up with the toys and gave several of them major roles in their stories. Most notably, Pyro, Rotorstorm, and Lightformer Ironfist were the heroes of 2010's Last Stand of the Wreckers, opposite the sadistic evil of Overlord, while Thunderclash would memorably feature in the 2012 series More Than Meets the Eye, comics that rapidly turned these once virtually unknown bots into fan favourites, and raised their profile to the point that some of them even got new mainline toys in the years that followed. While their obscurity means the Euro-exclusive years are often overlooked, it really can't be overstated how key a role they played in keeping Transformers from disappearing forever. If not for the European line, Hasbro US wouldn't have been inspired to revive the series as Generation 2, and while, as we've discussed, G2 wasn't a big success, its stumble proved the need for the franchise to radically reinvent itself, which led to 1996's Beast Wars, the drastically different toy line that finally brought Transformers the US market success it had been missing since the 80s, and marked the turning point that saw it go from a struggling series on its last legs to the evergreen property that Simon Spalding always believed it could be. And those are the basics on Generation 1.5. Credit in particular for this episode has to go to James Roberts' book, Generation Mechs, A History of Transformers Fandom, that recently shed new light on the European years through interviews with Spalding and Cousins. For more Transformers history, subscribe and check out my archive, and watch new episodes before everyone else by becoming a channel member or a Patreon.